What is going on, Arc Junkies? Welcome back to the show. I apologize for last week. I did not put out an episode. I've actually been sick since I left CanWeld back in mid-October, and I figured y'all probably didn't want to listen to an episode of me coughing, sneezing, and blowing my nose the whole time. So I took a week off to get some rest and get back to 100%. I'm still not there just yet. I'm about 90, 95. But I am getting better just in time to head out to Austin for the AWS Inspection Expo and Conference this week, which should be a lot of fun. This is one of the conferences I've been looking forward to all year, partly because I've never been out there to Austin, and I've heard it's actually a pretty cool place, and I get to catch up with some of my friends that I haven't seen in a while, so I'm really looking forward to that. This will also be my last business travel for the year, so it'll be nice to stay at home for more than a week before hopping onto another plane for another event. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Alisyn Palla from Marikai Metalworks. Alisyn is an attorney turned welder and artist. She builds some really cool stuff. Most recently, she built this massive family tree / grapevine for a local family-owned restaurant and is now working on 3 additional commissions for her city. I first heard about Alisyn through Stephanie Hoffman because Alisyn took Steph's welding course up at Underground Metalworks in New Jersey to improve her technical welding knowledge last February. We'll get right into our story after a quick word from the folks to help keep the lights on in the BuzzBox studio. Today's episode of the Arc Junkies Podcast is brought to you by CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. CK has been in the TIG welding game since 1967, crafting some of the finest torches, parts, and accessories on the markets. Have you ever tried the CK FlexLock torch? I have, and it's by far my personal favorite TIG torch that I've ever used. I even bought one for my home shop. If you haven't had a chance, hop on over to their website, ckworldwide.com. The FlexLock has a unique 360-degree rotating head, and it's a game changer that's available in both gas or water-cooled machines. Combine this torch with the SuperFlex cables, and you're set with an unmatched flexibility and long-lasting performance. Other CK innovations include the Gas Saver kits with glass nozzles, providing better gas flow coverage and visibility while saving on gas consumption. And their recently introduced MT375 AC/DC TIG welding machine with water cooler and cart. When it comes to TIG welding, CK Worldwide isn't just in the game, they're leading it. Equip yourself with the best at ckworldwide.com. We're also brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. Rockmount makes the coolest, most reliable rods and wires specifically designed to weld in the harshest environments, which is exactly where we as welders usually have to perform our craft. Their electrodes allow you to weld through dirt, paint, grime, oil, hydrocarbons, and other junk that's always in your way, and it's still going to provide you a quality weld free of discontinuities that you'd end up with had you used a traditional electrode designed for initial fabrication. Rockmount not only carries rods and wires for maintenance welding, they also carry burrs, bits, blades, threaded inserts, and most recently, hoods and papper systems. Check out their website today, rockmountwelding.com, and see their full line of consumables and gear to help you weld stronger so your repairs can last longer. And as a listener of the Arc Junkies podcast, you can use promo code AJP at checkout and get a free 1-pound tube of Tartan AAA when you spend $250 or more on their website. Get the job done right the first time, every time with Rockmount. We're also brought to you by Outlaw Leather, quality welding gear built right here in the United States in Pasadena, Texas. Outlaw handcrafts each one of their leather pieces using only the highest quality of leather so that your gear will stand the test of time. My buddies over at Outlaw create the coolest custom pieces in the industry, and they're the original. Don't be fooled by the copycats out there. Support the folks that put the design on the map. You can reach out to Outlaw and get one-of-a-kind leather gear like welding hoods, bolt bags, arm pads, rod pouches, utility belts, tool scabbards, and more. For custom work, just shoot them an email at info@outlawleatherllc.com. Or you can still pick up some of their in-stock pieces, which are still made by hand by going to their website, outlawleather.com. And as a listener of the Arc Junkies podcast, you can save 15% off on all their in-stock leather goods by using promo code ARCJunkies in the discount box at checkout. All right, y'all know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Thank you for downloading show number 300 of the Arc Junkies Podcast.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, Alisyn, welcome to the Arc Junkies Podcast.
Hey, Jason, how's it going?
It's going good. It's been a minute since we got to meet each other in person. So we got to meet each other at FabTech. But prior to that, Stephanie told me all about you. And I had no idea you were even at the show, because when we went to go acquire Underground Metalworks, she was telling me about like the different types of students that she's had in her program. I guess folks have flown all the way up from Hawaii, Alaska. And she's like, yeah, and there's this one rad, badass attorney, came all the way from California to take the welding class. So, we got to link up at FabTech, and Steph's like, yeah, this is her. This is the chick I was telling you about.
Yep, that's me.
As an attorney, what got you into, what made you interested in welding? Have you always been like into welding and just wanted to go get some formal training, or was it like on a whim, or like what caused you to kind of switch from white collar attorney to get into, welding and artwork?
So when I was a kid growing up, my dad was a dairy farmer, and he, as a hobby, loved to build cars and work on dune buggies and stuff. And he stick welded, and I was terrified of it because they were, it's messy and there's sparks everywhere. And so I never really learned how to weld, but I was always out in the shop with my dad working on cars and helping and probably asking way too many questions. And then in 2010, my neighbor gave me his used Harbor Freight welder. He moved to Bangladesh and was like, here, there you go. I'm not taking it with me. I didn't know anything about welding. I didn't know anything about cutting, manipulating metal. So I became a sponge and just learned as much as I could from YouTube, reading materials, whatever I could. And a lot of experiments, a lot of failures at the beginning. But I just kept practicing, and family and friends would ask me like, hey, can you build this? Or I would make something special for somebody for Christmas or whatever, because, I just was wanting to create. But I was a full-time litigation attorney, so I didn't have a whole lot of free time to do that. And so I got really busy with my practice. So there were years where I just didn't even go out in my then garage and create at all. And then last year, my parents remodeled their front yard, and we as a family built a fence and a gate, and I got to hand cut their custom gate for them. And it made me realize, like, wow, I really miss creating. And I had done it and then not done it, taken years off. I had a shop one time in a local beach town and just got burnt out because I would drive to the beach, open the shop. I shared it with two other friends, and we would take turns opening it, but I would work full time, create at night on the weekends. And then when I was running the shop, I would leave and go do the shop. So I just got super burnt out trying to do both. And so I said,
exhausting.
so I decided, I'm not going to create. I'm not going to create. I don't want to do art as like a side gig or anything. I'm just going to practice law. And then last year, when I built the fence and gate with my parents, it totally got me inspired. And in 2019, I'd gone in-house counsel instead of full-time litigation. So now this year I had a little bit more flexibility. And after we finished the gate and the fence, I was like, I really want it. I've never been formally trained to weld. And so I wanted to take a course. And so I did some research, and I found out Stephanie had a school. And not only did she have a school, but she had a sculpting class. And so I could plan it so that I could do a week-long intensive of MIG, TIG, stick, and then turn around on Sunday and end the week with a sculpting class. And so I went to New Jersey, and that's how I met Steph.
Very cool. Now, when you went out there, like, kind of what were you expecting as far as going through a 1 week comprehensive class? Because it's a lot to learn in like a short amount of time.
It is, especially when you don't know all the technical terms and everybody else. I think everyone else in the class had at least some welding experience. And in fact, we're going into welding as a career choice. And so a lot of the introductory lecture type stuff completely went over my head. But my hope was to get some hands-on training and learn really how to weld. I wanted to understand the processes. And I had never, ever held a TIG torch in my hand before. So I figured I can work on my MIG skills and learn how to TIG, and then hopefully get to stick, which we didn't because we all had so much fun TIG welding. We just spent the rest of the week TIG. Mm-hmm. So but yeah, no, I just wanted to get some experience, get some education, and learn and then take it back because I think it's one thing to be creative, but if you don't know or understand the processes that you're using, regardless of what medium you choose, I think understanding the processes and being willing to experiment and being willing to learn and grow makes you a better artist in the long run. So I was hoping to get that technical training to collaborate with my creativity and hopefully make some cool stuff.
Yeah, no, and you're 100% right. You got to understand the process, and then you have to understand like the different tools. So I got into woodworking, like I've been welding forever, but like I had an intro to woodworking back when I was in high school. And then I kind of do woodworking on the side as a hobby because like I weld full time. I teach welding. That's all I do is talk about welding, and I know welding stuff. So I was like, well, what better way to get into something else than to start with, wood, because it's kind of similar. I'm changing the medium, I'm changing the tool, but at the end of the day, I'm still cutting, shaping, forming, and sticking things together. I'm just using wood glue and nails over here, and I'm using, stick, MIG, TIG, and flux core on this side. So learning what tools do what job make you so much more efficient. And then as an artist, you can say, hey, this tool was designed to do this, but I can also do this with it. I met some guys, Red Soul. I had them on the podcast like a long time ago. Like when I first started the pod, or when I first took over the podcast, and they're based out of Seattle, Washington. But that's like their whole thing is like you can't buy this stuff pre-made. It all has to be completely fabricated by hand. And we just take tools, that are meant for one purpose. We repurpose them to get different shapes and textures and, all that stuff. So it's understanding the tools and the process is huge with regardless of what endeavor you're getting into.
Oh, I'm going to sound like a complete dork right now, but that I've discovered this at FabTech. I'd never seen one before, and it's so simple and it's been around forever, but I want one now. I think it removes paint. It's got a bunch of like pins on it, and it beats
like a needle scaler.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that would make some seriously cool textures if you had the right gauge sheet metal or whatever. And I want one.
It could.
And they've been around forever, but I've never used one.
Yeah. So
definitely not for that purpose.
Yeah. When I was out of Disney, we actually had to do some work for the Haunted Mansion. And all of the rail. Have you ever been? Well, you're out in California. You've obviously.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have Haunted Mansion out there. But when you go through, they've got like this little, I don't know, 1.5 foot tall gate that kind of goes around the perimeter and stuff like that. And then some of the other gates, well, they have to look antiqued. So it's all like 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch solid steel square bar. And we have to make it look antique. So we actually took like 5 or 6 pieces and we tack them together on an I-beam and then clamp them down rather heavily. And we got a jackhammer with we just reformed the end where it's like a little tiny ball on the end of it. And we just had the apprentices out there every night just going through, just texturing. And then we'd flip it and, because you got to get all 4 sides. And that's all they did was just texture this stuff before they even cut it apart and started building the gates and handrails and things out of it.
Right. Yep. No, I don't know all the technical terms, but I sure as hell do enjoy learning how to use the tools and experimenting with them, even if, like you said, you don't use them for their original purpose.
Yeah. And now you're part of the welding community, so you could just reach out to anybody on Instagram and like get an answer like almost instantaneously.
I have to say that's probably one of my favorite things about getting more involved in the trades community is number one, the wealth of knowledge. I'm constantly impressed with just how much people know in the trades industry. But even better than that is their willingness to share what they know. And it's been interesting to me in the last year, maybe even like the last 6 months, I've had even people reach out to me and say, hey, how did you do this? And my whole thing, and I've learned this with other tradespeople, is that I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. If I can save you 8 hours in the shop by not screwing this piece up because, I did this and it failed and I learned this, I want you to learn. But I also feel like one of the best ways to learn is to experiment and fail, try and fail, because you will never forget how to fix it. You will never forget, oh, that didn't work last time, I won't do that again. Yeah. So it's kind of a catch-22, I guess.
Yeah, that's a common reoccurring theme on the podcast with a lot of the guests is you learn so much more through failure than getting things right the first time, especially if you screw
1000%.
something up, because typically when you screw something up, it's on like a Friday night, all the stores are closed and you got to make do with what you got, because whatever you're working on, you're turning it in tomorrow or first thing Monday morning, and everybody's closed until then. So you got to figure out a way to make this work with what you have.
Yep. And there's a lot and my shop is a little shop of experiments all the time. I'm always constantly like, I'm going to see if this works and what it looks like. And there's a lot of cutting and redoing and whatever until it gets the way I want it. But I'm not afraid to, see if it can go together and see what it looks like. And, I recently at the suggestion of Stephanie and Dave Rubin, they were like, oh, collectively, we were on the phone talking about a piece that I was working on. And I can't remember which one, but one of them suggested, well, you could put it in a tumbler. And one of them was like, well, you could beat it with some rocks because I wanted some texture. So I wound up combining them and I took some leaves that I was making and I threw them in a cement mixer I had lava rock in my back garden, got a couple buckets of that, threw it all in and turned it on. My neighbors hated me for a good couple hours for sure. Probably part of neighborhood watch now, 1,00000%.
But did it work?
But it did work. And I got some really cool texture out of the leaves that kind of gave it that, and I think even a little bit thinner gauge metal would have even given it more of a crinkled effect, but I got that very small veiny look that you get in leaves without having to put it on there myself. So I was happy about that.
Yeah, that's a time saver for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they've got, so Harbor Freight actually has, I can't remember what the name is. It's like a vibrating pot that you can actually, it's like a polisher. So you can fill it full of all kinds of different media and you can add water or not add water, but it's like, you can polish specific things. So it's very similar to that.
Oh, wow.
So like, but it's not like a mixer type apparatus, but you can get different finishes and stuff like that. So if you have a bunch of pieces, you could just throw everything in there, put the lid on it, 24 hours, come back, and it's like, boom, done.
I think I might actually have to go get one of those now that you say that. Cause, for all my roses that I make, I just freehand cut each petal and then I hand form them. And, with hand cutting, there's always going to be some dross on the back of the sheet metal that you're going to have to clean up. And one of the things I learned with the mixer and tumbling was that that's an easy way to get all of that off without sitting there with a grinder trying to take it off. But the petals are much smaller and I don't know that I want that texture. So I'm looking for other ideas on how to easily remove the crunchies.
Put them in, the dross on the edges, if you put that in vinegar overnight, just regular household vinegar for 24 hours, not only will it take the dross off, but it'll take the mill scale off.
Oh, I see. I knew about the mill scale, but I didn't realize it would take the dross off too.
Yeah, so my buddy Brian Legalio, he was telling me all about this stuff, lifting mill scale, but I also got into some CNC plasma cutting forums, and a lot of the guys and gals, they'll actually, for their bigger pieces, like signs and stuff like that, they'll get a kiddie pool from like Walmart or whatever, and then they'll put a couple inches of just regular household vinegar in there, let it sit for a day or so, and then you pop it back out, and the stuff just wipes right off. That way you're not sacrificing, if you want to maintain that finish or you don't want to polish it up or anything like that, you could do that kind of safely without having to put it against like aggregate or sandblasting or anything like that.
Right.
And then you can go to your local hardware store. Like if you're in a pinch as far as time, go to your local hardware store and they actually sell, I think it's like a 30 or 40% vinegar, because the stuff that we use for the house and everything, that's all like distilled. So it's not like pure. I think it's kind of diluted. But you can get a much stronger strength at hardware stores they use it a lot for industrial cleaning, and it'll kind of expedite that process. So maybe instead of 24 hours, you're looking at like 4 or 5, and then you just have to take it out and rinse it off. That way it kind of neutralizes and it stops that chemical reaction. So otherwise it'll just go to rust.
I knew that about the mill scale, and funny story, right before I left for FabTech, I did all the leaves and I before I tumbled them, I threw them in vinegar to get the mill scale off. So I wasn't just sitting there grinding them. And of course I ground all the dross off. Now, next time I'm going to try it without having to do that. But I had them in vinegar for like 3 days. And then I was packing my bag for FabTech and I was listing off all the things like that I needed. And I was like, shit, the leaves are still in the vinegar. So I called Stephanie and I was like, hey, if I take these out, I have to put WD-40 or something on them. Do I need to deal with them now, or can I deal with them in 4 days when I get back from FabTech? She's like, I have never left anything in there that long. Good luck. You might come back and it might just be mush. And I was like, okay. So I went out there in my jammies and my rubber boots and I cleaned everybody before I left for FabTech.
Did you coat it with like WD-40 or something so it wouldn't rust?
Yeah.
That was the thing that I found out, because I did a piece, I soaked it in the vinegar, and then I took it out and rinsed it off and just dried it off. And then like the next day I came back and it was completely rust covered. And I had to start the whole process back over. So it was like, all right, back in the vinegar. And then once it came back out, rinse it, dry it, and then like put WD-40 on it. Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't even wind up taking the WD-40 off because after I put the WD-40 in, I threw them in the mixer with the lava rock, and the dust kind of wiped a lot of it off. And then for the leaves, I wound up cleaning where I was going to weld, but then I wound up heating them for color, and it burned all of the WD-40 off anyway. So I lucked out. I didn't have to deep clean them before I clear coated them.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I've actually used vinegar when I got into, like I said, I was doing woodworking. I built a shelf for my wife, and I wanted to kind of antique the wood. So I had like some old cypress wood old cedar wood. So I just cleaned the exterior with a wire brush just to kind of get it aged looking. And then I took steel wool and dissolved that in vinegar. It's probably like a week, but within a week, like the entire jar, it was a mason jar, was just filled with steel wool, and I dumped vinegar in there, and it ate all the steel wool and just turned it into like a super fine liquid. And you just mix it up really good and kind of use that as a stain on the wood, and it soaks in really deep, and it looks really cool.
Wow, that's a cool idea. I like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, especially if you get into like wood and metal. Like those two mediums together is really coal. I love any chance I get to put a little bit of metal on wood or wood on metal. It makes it pop.
I do enjoy doing that as well. I've made a couple like furniture pieces that were both metal and wood, and I liked both of them. Wood and I don't play as well together as metal and I do, because wood is less forgiving than metal, because if you cut too short or anything, it's hard to add. You can't add wood back in, but you can add a little bit of metal and then clean it up. So I would say if you want woodworking, anything done by me, it has to be perfectly imperfect, and you have to be okay with that.
Well, that works. I mean, that's what kind of gives it that artistic touch.
Yeah, I don't do I always do rustic things. My friends are like, hey, can you make me this perfectly fabricated wood thing? And I'm like, nope, can't do it. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. I built a keepsake box out of my kid's swing set, and it was all out of cedar, because I didn't want to throw it away, and it was like in such poor shape I didn't want to donate it or give it to anybody or try and sell it. So I was like, let me just reclaim the wood, and it sat in the garage for a couple of weeks, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to build a keepsake box. So that's what I did, but it was like It's perfectly imperfect. I mean, it's symmetrical, it fits together, but like you were saying, like once you cut something off, you can't really add wood back to it. But I mean, there was a couple times that I kind of misguided my router or nicked it with the saw in the wrong spot. I actually took wood glue, and you take the sawdust from when you sand and mix those two together, and you make your own putty that's like an exact color match to the material you're working with. So instead of trying to use wood filler, it blends in. And once it dries, you really can't tell anything.
Nope. I've actually used that trick before when I cut it a little bit too short or got a nick in something, and it worked pretty well. We did a similar thing when we got married. We built our own dance floor in the backyard, and I took all that wood left over from the dance floor. And when because I'm a DIY weekend warrior on the house, and I don't like to hire someone to do something that I can either do or figure out to do. However, I am getting older, and I'm realizing that it is okay to pay someone who does that for a living and have it take them an hour versus me losing 3 days of my life trying to figure it out.
I'm
so
right there with you.
I have learned that lesson with age. But we took our dance floor and I turned them into closet door cabinets, like rustic closet door cabinets in our hallway for storage. So we were able to repurpose the dance floor from the wedding and put it inside the house as something. So that was kind of cool.
That's neat. Yeah, you get like a little keepsake from the event.
Yeah. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
I hate, like you said, you hate to see it go to waste.
Yeah, like I didn't want to throw it away. I was like, man, that's cedar. It's like naturally bug proof. It's like naturally weatherproof. It just stands the test of time forever. So why not use that?
Yep, it's kind of fitting for a keepsake box.
Yeah. So what are you working on in your shop now? Now that you went out to Underground Metalworks up in Jersey and you learned all the fundamentals of welding and the technical terms, and you linked up with some new people, and you went to FabTech, and now you're back in the garage. What have you been working on since FabTech?
So when I went to FabTech, I was right in the middle of finishing a very large metal grapevine sculpture for a restaurant that's building a new location. It's probably one of the busiest local family-owned restaurants that we have in our area. And they came to me and asked if I had any ideas for, basically they wanted a divider between their dining room and their kitchen. They've always been known for having the ability to see everything that's happening in the kitchen. And it's fun to go to dinner there and watch the kitchen, working away. And so they didn't want to put the traditional, clouded glass or anything like that. They wanted it to feel more creative and artistic. And so we had kind of bounced around some ideas with regard to maybe some hand cut panel work or something like that. And the owner said, I wish we could do something like a family tree, like tell the story of our family tree. Well, they're an Italian family. So I came up with the idea of what if we did 6 separate grapevine trunks and we brought them all together as one big sculpture as the divider in the restaurant. So since FabTech, I finished the sculpture. We actually installed it last Saturday, but the restaurant has not opened yet. So I haven't shown any full pictures of the sculpture because I want the opening night to be the first opportunity for the owner to show off the restaurant, including my work. So that one's finished. It was a great one. I had never used heat to manipulate metal before. So that was an adventure for me to build an entire sculpture using a process I had never done.
It's a lot easier to manipulate when it's warm, when it's hot.
Yes. And there was one, construction is nothing's really ever perfect in construction in terms of like, you never really know what you're going to get. And that was the first time I ever had built something for something that didn't exist yet, because they're building the building while I'm building the sculpture. So
that can be dangerous.
I would go and take Yeah, right. I would go take measurements and they'd be like, oh, by the way, we added more trim in this space. So I'd have to, adjust the sculpture accordingly. So there's 2 vines that wrap around columns, and those I kept taking them down for a dry fit test, kept fitting them, making sure they fit, because I wanted to make sure they looked like they were wrapping around the columns. And there was there's 2 on the edge that were in a separate section, and I didn't take them down for a dry fit. And in the meantime, they added like 3 or 4 inches of extra trim and materials and stuff. So I did have to manipulate one of the vines in the field with no heat, which was an adventure. It was solid inch rod, and I had 2 guys on one end, and thankfully I work out. So I guess it worked itself out. But yeah, no, it wound up fitting, and it looks great, and I'm excited for everyone to see it. And then I'm going to be starting the city of Wasco, which is a small town nearby. They're doing a downtown beautification project. So they've hired me to do 3 separate sculpture/art installations for their city. So I kind of gave myself this week to just decompress and get my shop cleaned up and ready for the next big project. And then I'll be jumping in on those next week. So
that's the hard part about going from one project to the next, is you got everything exactly where you need it for one project. And then you got to break everything down, clean everything up, and start in the next project, and you can't find anything.
Right. Oh, 1000%. And this is totally different. Like the grapevine was, heating and manipulating metal, and then, decorating, adding the grapes. And I made my own grapes, I made my own leaves, and then putting it all on there. The Wasco projects, one of them is a big rose arbor. And like I was saying earlier, like I hand cut all my rose petals and everything. And so I'm going to be making anywhere from 70 to 100 independent roses by hand that will go on an arbor. Yeah, it's a lot of roses.
And you're gonna hand cut all those and form them and heat them, and because so you're making like typical, like the traditional rose that you start off with a flat piece and then you kind of work everything together with like 2 pairs of needle nose pliers.
Yeah, so each petal is individually cut, and so I'll bend them and manipulate them, and then I'll just work my way from the center out, just kind of slowly tacking them together and getting the form that I want. They take anywhere, depending on how big I make them, they take me anywhere from, I've been making them for 10 years, so they take me anywhere from 15 minutes for a small one to an hour for a big one that's nice and full. So it's going to be a very labor-intensive project. I'll probably be like T-Rex in a couple of weeks.
Carpal tunnel setting in.
Yeah.
Now, how did you make the grapes? Because grapes are symmetrical. So how did you form spheres?
Oh, I cheated. I bought the spheres.
Okay.
1000%.
Okay. There's no cheating in welding.
I bought this. I bought vineyard stamped solid rod. I had just under 1/4 of an inch and then just under an inch. So the inch ones were the trunks, and then the 1/4 of an inch ones were for the grape stems, and then the curlies that went along the vines. And so I would just take the 1/4 inch rod and I would bend it in kind of like a spiral cone shape, kind of the shape of a grape if it was inside. And then I just worked my way from the bottom up and just tacked the spheres on around the outside, trying to keep my welds on the inside and as quiet and not seen as possible. And then just made, I don't know, I think I wound up making 45 or 50 grape clusters for that piece.
Jeez.
So I had 2 months to do it. And I think the prefabricated stuff is great for some things, but it took me probably a month to bend the rod and make the trunks and everything. And after putting that much blood, sweat, tears, and branding myself on more than one occasion, it was really hard for me to put the prefabricated stuff on the vines. Just visually, I wanted the look of less perfect. And so I decided to make my own grapes, and then making my own grapes turned into making my own leaves. And so the whole sculpture, with the exception of making the metal itself, was completely hand done.
Wow.
So
I did something similar. Well, not something similar. I built a mailbox that has vine work on it. And I bought the leaves. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to sit there and plasma cut all these and then engrave all the little stems and the vein work and all that. I was like, nah, I went and bought 10 of them and we'll tack them on there.
Yeah, but remember, there's no cheating in welding, so it's fine.
There's not, no, especially when you're not artistic. And like, I've tried to forge out a freaking leaf doing like blacksmith work, and that's a lot harder than it looks on YouTube.
Oh, no doubt. I really want to learn how to do some blacksmithing. I think it would be very cool. I went and learned how to blow glass this year, and I learned how to fuse glass, and then I took some pottery classes. I'm like a creative sponge. Like, I want to learn all the different mediums so that if and when the time is right to use it on a project, I've got that skill set, or at least that knowledge base to say, oh, I'm going to experiment with this and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, blacksmithing's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. It's very labor intensive, but it's a lot of fun just to be able to take shape and form and manipulate metal to your will. And sometimes the metal wins. There's been several occasions where I try to build something and the metal wins. And there's been a few times that I've been the victor.
Oh, the metal kicks my ass in my shop all the time, every day. I get it.
You should look up. So we have the Florida Artists Blacksmith Association here in Florida. Okay. But I know it's a national organization. So it might be like CABA where you're at. So like California Artists or California Artists Blacksmith Association. But they have sections all over the place. And like ours, we do the original chapter that I was a part of. They used to meet the third Saturday or the first Saturday of every month. Now they've actually started a section in Orlando, and we host it over at Underground Metalworks in Orlando. So it's the third Saturday of every month. We do the blacksmithing events. So it's really cool, and it's cool. I think it's like $30 a year to join, and that covers like the coal and the metal and all that stuff. And they do like intro to blacksmithing, and then you'll start a project and be like, okay, here's step 1 through 5. Okay, go back to your forge and do those. And if you have any questions, just ask one of the smiths there that know how to do this stuff. And then when you come back, you're like, okay, now here's step 6 through 9, and go back to your forge. And by the end of the day or the end of the a couple of weekends of that stuff, you've got something that kind of resembles what they were trying to show you how to do anyway.
That's really neat. There's an art studio up in San Jose, California that does, it's like a gallery / studio, and they do, I want to go up there because they'll do metalsmithing classes, they'll do blacksmithing classes, they'll do glass blowing classes. They do a whole bunch of different mediums, and they offer classes for the community to come in and just take them for a weekend. And I would love to go up there. It's not too far from me, so I think I'm going to have to go hit them up because they've got some great opportunities for their local community.
That sounds really cool, kind of like a makerspace.
I would love to have something like that. Bakersfield is we're working on our art community here. We've got some amazing artists, and we're trying to bring some attention into the arts downtown and throughout the city. And I think it'd be so cool to have a studio and literally it doesn't even have to be an art gallery or a studio. Set up a place where if somebody wants to come experiment with welding and play with metal for a day, they can, or if they want to throw clay for a day, they can, and just have this big open space, obviously with proper safety measures to protect each, skill set. But I just think it'd be cool because, not everybody can afford to go out and buy a welder just to screw around in their shop or their garage. And not everybody can afford to buy a pottery wheel, but they can afford to come take a class and have a couple hours of enjoyment and learn the process and see if it's something that they might want to do down the road.
Yeah, no, that'd be really cool. That's because I know some of the different cities and stuff, they have what they call a makerspace. But it's like welding, machining, woodworking, things like that. A bunch of different disciplines inside the building. I think they have something like that in Orlando, but it's more technical. It's more like 3D printing and stuff like that. Not necessarily like welding and woodworking and glass blowing and all that stuff. I think glass blowing would be really cool. Like I've watched those videos.
Have you ever done it?
No, I've never done it, but I've watched videos for hours on YouTube.
It's so beautiful. We went to a glass blowing workshop in Santa Barbara, which is only like a couple hours from where we live, and we had such an amazing time. It was so fun. Yeah,
I watched them. I went to Disney one year, and they've got like this place that they make custom glass pieces and all that, and all the Disney figurines. And it was like what is it, Downtown Disney? I can't remember what they call it now. I've always called it Downtown Disney. They changed the name recently, and I just refuse to call it by its new name, so I can't remember it.
Same.
But
Me neither. I feel you.
I sat there and watched this guy like doing glass work, like real small type figurines and stuff. So it wasn't necessarily glass blowing, but like taking different pieces and heating them up in front of the torch and molding them and sticking them together. And, it's just really cool to watch. I like watching people that are like really good at their craft do their thing. Yep. There's just something about that. I'll get wrapped up in those little Instagram holes of people that are like really efficient at their work, and it's like a 5-minute video and they're just doing their thing. It's like, man, that's freaking cool. You can tell that's a lot of years and, time, experience, just being able to do these what looks to be a simple movement, and they're just killing it.
Well, craftsmanship is absolutely an art form. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, whether you're a framer or a welder or a finished carpenter or whatever. Being good at what you do, I believe that it's a creative art form, because it takes a level of pride and heart and soul in your work to prepare a finished product that is appealing and well done. There's people out there who hurry through their process and doing whatever, but to really take the time and do it well, it's true artisan, I believe. But
yeah,
who am I?
100%. You would think you guys would have like a bigger art scene out there in Bakersfield, because you've had some pretty prominent figures come out of Bakersfield, California. Like
we do a lot of country music.
Well, I was going to say the entire band from Korn came out of Bakersfield, California, and then Merle Haggard came from Bakersfield.
And Buck Owens.
Oh, no shit. Okay.
Yeah. We actually have a Buck Owens Crystal Palace, which is like a restaurant / they have country music singers come and play there on the weekends or whatever. Big country. We're very much construction, agriculture, and oil and gas here. So our art scene has always been things like cars and music. And so more of the visual arts, I think, is coming more to life in downtown. We're doing some beautification projects right now, where they're painting murals, on the freeways, and trying to just make parts of the community more engaged in art and creativity, and, respecting their homes, like areas a little bit more. We found too that that when we do the murals and stuff, we have a little bit less graffiti in that area, because there's an art form, and graffiti is another form of art.
Oh, it sure
and so artists sees artists, and they respect the space a little bit more, which I think is pretty cool. So we're working on it. We're working on it.
They actually did that in Orlando, and they did a bunch of murals on the sides of buildings and stuff like that, but they let the local graffiti artists do all the work. And I think they were compensated to do it as well. But you go down and like you see these beautiful, murals and wallscapes and stuff like that. But it's all freehand with a rattle can. That dude, Yucky Bucky. So Stephanie's friend Buck, who did the original artwork in her facility, came down to do the same artwork, different color scheme, down here in Orlando. So we hired him to come down here and do all the, and just, I mean, that is an art. I was just sitting there in awe watching this guy with a rattle can just shake the can and just spray it. And like, he's got very specific paints that he uses and a way that he does things. And I'm like, man, that doesn't look right. And then all of a sudden he'd come back up with a different can, get closer. And I was like, oh, holy shit. Like he's cutting it in and like, he knows what he's doing. I was like, wow, this is something freaking amazing.
I have wanted to collaborate with a graffiti artist for years. I don't know, in my brain it's there, but it's one of those things where it's like in your brain, but you can't really see it. There's some piece I want to make someday that it's graffiti art, but it's done both with metal and paint. So probably a graffiti artist would have to draw it. I would recreate it out of metal, and then we would go back with the finish on the graffiti side. I don't know. There's something out there that would be so freaking cool to do. But I don't know any graffiti artists. So if you do,
I'll link you up with Buck. I'll link you up with Buck. He's such a cool dude. And he's like really, really good friends with Stephanie.
Okay.
And then it turns out like he brought, because he has family here in Central Florida. And so I guess his sister-in-law came in like the last day that he was there to check out the work that he did. And she brought her 2 kids with her. And we got to talk, and she's like, "Oh yeah, like one of our friends is a welder." I was like, "Oh yeah, what's his name?" She's like, "Oh, Kyle." And she's like, "He works for this boat company." And I was like, "Kyle Thompson?" And she's like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And I was like, "I was his welding instructor. I actually had him on the podcast like 4 weeks ago." So the welding community is a very small, tight knit community. It's crazy who you'll run into.
Yeah. I feel like my trip to FabTech, I met so many people. I had so many wonderful conversations, but I truly, in my core, believe that I made lifelong friends at FabTech, and it was my first one. It was the best experience.
So you had a lot of fun then.
I had a lot of fun.
You had a lot of fun?
Oh yeah, I had a blast. It was I was there for like, I don't even know if I was there a full 72 hours. I flew in the afternoon on Sunday, and I flew out at like 6 o'clock in the morning on, I think it was Wednesday.
Did you
so I was
make
only
your
there
flight?
for 2 full days. I made my flight.
Okay.
I don't know how I made my flight, but I made my flight. I actually wound up not going to sleep that night. We hung out. Plan. And then I was like, oh, I got to go pack. I'm going to go pack. And then by the time I finished packing, got my room, everything put back together, I had maybe an hour and a half. And I was like, that's so stupid to try and sleep for an hour and a half.
Yeah, don't do it to yourself. Just go to the airport early.
But I very quickly realized that I am not in my 20s anymore, and pulling all-nighters does not vibe well.
Oh, they hurt. They hurt the next day so bad.
They're brutal. Yeah.
I'm right there with you. So are you planning on doing FabTech Orlando next year?
I am, absolutely. I was talking to some friends today about, okay, guys, like I'm going to go to Orlando this time. If you want to go, like, let's figure out how to do a big group trip, and I'm going to go do my thing. And then, but I was actually telling them about the robotics part. I was fascinated. I only got to spend a couple hours in there, but the robotics section was just, I can't believe what we can do with computers and robotics and stuff. It's almost scary sometimes, but it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. I just went to the welding automation conference up in Columbus, Ohio a couple weeks ago. And that was, I mean, the things that they're getting these robots to do is just insane. I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, you put a welder in front of one of those things with their imagination, and I want to see somebody take a robot and do an art piece with it. Mm-hmm. I think that'd be cool.
I don't know. Yeah.
There's got to be something. You just get one of those little cobot tabletop units or whatever and just figure it out.
Do you think that a robot could create something that doesn't exist? Although all art is really kind of a copy of something else. You just put your own flair on it. To
an extent, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, do you think a robot can create an original, though?
Not on its own. No, I mean, you have to program it. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and, just be idle. But I think if you went through and programmed, yeah. But I mean, because you can program all the different coordinates, especially with a cobot. You just grab the head and then move it to where you want it, and you hit the button and it records that point, and then you tell it, in the teach pendant what you want it to do at that point, whether it's start a weld, terminate a weld, whatever, and then you move it to the next point, and then you tell it what you want it to do at that point, terminate, do a radius here, or do whatever, cut to a 26-degree angle, and you just program all that stuff in there. So it'd almost be like freehand plasma cutting, but with welding. So I mean, you could actually, you could take a piece of material and just draw and just kind of do, I don't know what they call additive manufacturing, and just do layers upon layers of welds and stuff like that. But it's just so precise, and the speeds you can get out of them are insane. The sky's the limit with that stuff. Yeah, no, it's impressive. Like I said, I only spent a couple hours in the robotics section, and Matt and I were desperately looking for the robot that poured the beer, and we could not find it. Oh yeah, my buddy found that one. I didn't get to see much of the show, but he was telling me, I was like, yeah, they had a robot pouring beer, and he's like, yeah, I know, they poured me one. I was like, damn it, you didn't bring me one back. No, we were trying to find the robot, and we just could not do it. So, oh well, maybe next year we'll find it. Yeah, Matt will be out here for. You're talking about Matt Bartles, right? I am. Yeah, he's a trip. I love that dude. I met him, I think the first night I was there, it would have been I don't even know. Anyway, they all blur together. We walked all of FabTech the second day I was there, the full day. We spent the day together. We were walking around. We entered into like contests, and we'd set our clocks and walk over when they were going to do the raffles and stuff. And then I did a podcast with CWB, and he hung out with me. He's like, you're not traveling in Chicago by yourself. I'm going to just go ahead and chill with you. We wound up missing the shuttle, and then it took us forever to get an Uber, but he's a good dude. Yeah, Matt's a solid dude. I like him. He comes out to a lot of the AWS events and stuff. We sit on some of the same advisory board committees, because he's with the millwrights out in Tampa. Right. Yeah, he's a good dude. Yeah. And so you definitely have to come to the Orlando FabTech, because we're supposed to have a old-fashioned off to see who can make the best old-fashioned.
I think there might have been a couple of drinks involved when we made that deal.
Oh, there was definitely some drinks involved with that one.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely willing to come to Orlando and make the best old fashioned. I don't mind doing that.
I can't wait to try it because I was telling my buddy the other day, like I'm an old fashioned stickler, and I had the best old fashioned that I think I've ever had. Believe it or not, of all places, Kobe Steakhouse.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding. I was like, well, let me try this because they use like a Japanese whiskey, which I'm not really fond of because it's got more of like it kind of tastes more like tequila than an actual bourbon or a whiskey. But whatever they put in it, they had like this little wooden star or whatever that they burnt and then they drop it in. It's fantastic.
Was it like anise? An anise, like the spice anise?
I think that's what
it is.
Like a
star, and they
burn it. They burn it there.
Probably
they
has
it
like
with a torch.
licorice.
But it didn't, because I'm not a big fan of licorice. It didn't have like a licorice taste at all.
No,
but it was really good.
Interesting. Well, we have a local whiskey society where we live, and so we were members of it before COVID. I don't know if they're still doing it or not. But one night they did a Japanese whiskey tasting, and they paired it with sushi. And I would never think in a million years to sip whiskey while I'm eating sushi. I just don't see those two things going well together. Mm-hmm. It was phenomenal. It was so good. Both the sushi and the whiskey, they paired very well together.
Really?
Probably that tequila profile that you don't like in the Japanese whiskey is probably what made it pair with the
because
seafood,
they use rice. Same way they make sake, if I'm not mistaken. Right. But they do it in,
I believe you are correct.
They use them in old U.S. whiskey barrels, very similar to how they do over in Scotland when they make scotch. They actually use recycled bourbon barrels from the U.S. because we can only use the barrels once to be considered a bourbon. So we sell the barrels off to Japan and Ireland and Scotland and all that stuff.
Yeah. So remind me, we're all using the same whiskey, or we get to pick our own whiskey?
No, you get to pick your own everything.
Okay.
I've got a secret weapon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were unwavering on which whiskey we were going to use. You wanted to definitely pick your own.
Yeah. Yeah, you can pick your own whiskey. You can pick your own oranges. You can pick your own whatever. It's just got to be...
Whatever?
You got to use a bourbon.
Okay.
It has to be a bourbon.
Okay.
And you
bourbon,
can use
done.
simple syrup or you can use the sugar cubes, whichever way you want to go.
I make my own stuff. It's fine.
Okay. Oh, damn. She's got like her own secret ingredients.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think
secret whiskey, secret ingredients.
I think that'll be cool because I actually invited some other people out. They're not going to do the bourbon thing, but I think we're going to do like I'm going to do a cookout. So we're going to try
we need neutral tasters. We can't taste our own because we're obviously going to know which one's ours.
So
we're going to need some
I've got a buddy,
third-party neutral tasters.
Yeah, I've got a buddy that's a bourbon snob. We'll put them all in the same glass. We'll number them on the bottom or something, so he won't even know what number he's drinking. We'll lay him out there and he can tell us which one he likes best.
Have you ever done that with wine? Are you a wine drinker?
I'm not. I've had like Moscato and stuff like that. It's not too bad. I started getting into red wine, but no, I'm not usually.
Yeah, we've done that with some friends with wine. You put the wine in a paper bag. People they'll bring like $100, $150 bottles, and then you've got other people who bring like $20 bottles, and inevitably the $20 to $50, like the cheaper bottles, almost always beat out the more expensive ones.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you looking to pick up your first welding machine? Maybe you're ready to upgrade from the machine you bought at the local discount tool store. Or maybe you need a machine, or a few machines for that matter, for your small business. Well, check out Everlast Welders. They have a machine for every skill level, budget, and process you need to handle. Even true multi-process machines like the Lightning MTS series. Check out their full list of power sources at everlastwelders.com and see which machine is right for you. And as always, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, get that free Nova foot pedal TIG Torch upgrade when you type in Arc Junkies in the comment section at checkout. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. We're also brought to you by Strong Hand Tool, my favorite manufacturer when it comes to fab tools and fab accessories. And right now, they're running all kinds of sales, like 20% off their gas cylinder grabber 2.0 with free shipping, 15% off Rhino Cart turntable packages with free shipping, and 10% max tables, Rhino carts, lifts, and 5/8 fixturing kits, once again coming in with the free shipping. Check out these deals and more right now at stronghandtools.com. These sales won't last long, so pick up that new table or fixturing kit and take advantage of these awesome deals. Now let's get back to the show. I can see that.
So,
There was actually a guy that was counterfeiting wine. So he would take like these old vintage bottles with the original labels, and he would like mix other wines together to get that same similar flavor profile. Because apparently the guy was like really renowned for his palate. So he was able to take other cheaper wines, mix them together, make something that tastes very, very similar to what should be in that bottle. And then he was dumping it, capping it, and putting the foil top and all that stuff on them and selling them for like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh my gosh.
And then he got busted.
Wow. That's a lot of work.
Yeah. I do want to try Caduceus wine. Have you had that? So that's produced by...
No.
So you've heard of Tool, the band Tool?
Uh-huh.
So Maynard James Keenan, that's like his passion project. He goes on tour and makes a bunch of money so he can go back and support his vineyard. He's got like a little vineyard over there in Arizona, and he makes Caduceus wine. But I can never find it anywhere.
It's a red?
Yeah, I think he makes a red. He probably makes a couple different versions. Yeah, but like I remember like years ago, I wasn't into wine at all, and he was doing an appearance at Whole Foods, and I wanted to go just to see him. Like I was going to buy the bottle of wine, get it autographed, and put it up on my shelf, but by the time I got out of work and fought through traffic, he was already gone.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah. That would have been a cool one.
Well, now I'm on the hunt for you. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah, and it's the same logo that you see on the side of the ambulance. It's the Caduceus symbol.
Okay. Noted. I'm going to find it.
Yeah. So what other art pieces are you producing? Actually, what was the first piece that you did? Because obviously the grapevine and everything, you didn't just like go to Underground Metalworks, take a sculpting class, and come back and start doing commission builds and stuff. What was your first piece?
Oh, so the first piece ever? The first art piece I ever sold, and I remember it because it was on my birthday. And so there was downtown Bakersfield for years has done what's called a First Friday, like an art walk, where local vendors can bring their pop-ups or tables or whatever and set up stuff. So I think it was like maybe 2 days before that. My birthday was on First Friday. Maybe 2 days before that, I was walking around downtown and I walked into one of our local arts associations. And they were like, "Oh, are you an artist?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I'm not." And they were like, "Oh, well, are you sure?" And I was like, "Well, I play with metal and I don't call myself an artist." They're like, "Oh, you play with metal? It's so different than what we have. Would you like to rent this entire window space for First Friday? You can have it for the whole month for $30. And I was like, "Okay, sure. It's only $30." Well, I had no art to put in the window. So I went home and I was like, "Okay, what can I make super quick?" So I took sheet metal and I cut out a heart and I made it broken. I punked some holes in it and I wound it back together with barbed wire, and I did all different shapes of broken hearts, and some of them I would wind back together with leather or whatever materials I could find that could mend a broken heart. And I called it my quote mended heart series. And I took them down there and put them in the window, and every single piece sold the first night that the First Friday was open. And I was just like, wait a minute.
Damn.
What just happened? Yeah. So I've only done the Mended Heart series once. I've done a couple of commissioned Mended Hearts since then, but those are my first pieces, and that was in 2010. But like I said, there were years where I didn't do any creating at all because I was too busy, with my day job. So, and then from there, it was just I would get hired to do custom like wall pieces or garden sculptures or whatever over the years. And my parents' fence and gate was probably the biggest project I had ever done, but it was a family affair, so I can't take all the credit for it. Mm-hmm. I did get the opportunity to hand cut their custom gate for them for the entrance into the patio. So that was pretty rad. But then this grapevine sculpture was definitely the biggest non-family related project that I've ever done. And I'm super stoked and honored to have been part of. It's going to be a beautiful space when it's done. But yeah, along the way, it was just commission wall pieces or garden sculptures or whatever kind of popped my way and that I had time for.
Damn. Now, do you see making yourself like, or doing this full time and like kind of leaving litigation and being a lawyer behind and doing artwork full time and pursuing? I mean, would that make you happy to do that, or are you still passionate about the law?
I don't know. If I'm being totally honest, I don't know that I've ever been passionate about the law per se. I love problem solving. The more complicated the problem, the more fun I have with it. I think that's probably where my passion is, which is also probably why I enjoy a lot of what I do out in my shop also, is because it's a lot of problem solving, because for me, every piece I make is the first time I've ever made that piece. And even if it's similar to something else I've done, I like to challenge myself and make it different or better, or what can I do different? So, I think I would miss it if I didn't exercise my brain in a business or a legal kind of way, because I'm that logical side of my brain and the creative side of my brain. They don't always play well together. Sometimes they really duke it out.
Right.
And I think for me, I think probably an ideal balance would be like right now I work in-house for a client. So I have a lot more flexibility and time to be in my shop. I can get all of my adulting day job work stuff done usually by 2:00. And then I try to jump out in my shop for the last few hours each day. And that is working really well for me because I'm using both sides of my brain. I wish I had a little bit more time in my shop. So I think my perfect balance would be maybe 30% adulting, whether it's project development, consulting, law, and 60 to 70% art. Because I've never been so fulfilled in every way since I have been this year, when I just decided, you know what, I'm going to just put myself out there. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to take a leap of faith and just jump into my art. And I've had so many wonderful opportunities thrown my way in just 6 to 8 months that I'm excited for what's to come. I have no idea what it's going to be, but I'm here for it. So yeah, I think 60, 70% creativity, art, and 30 to 40%, adulting would be a good little balance for me.
Yeah, because we kind of talked about that a little bit at Kitty O'Shea's when we got to meet and hang out before you had to catch your flight that next morning.
Yeah.
About, you said it was the year, I think you said it was the year of saying yes to things. And I was telling you, say yes, but be very careful with that, because a lot of times,
yes, I
run into it. I say yes to everything, and then I kind of paint myself into a corner, and it just becomes so much, or it becomes too much to an extent. But yeah, be careful with that. Have you, since you kind of took on that mentality of saying yes to everything, have you seen more doors opening up, more opportunities for you to go out and pursue your artwork?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I have. I have the next on my plate is the 3 Wasco sculptures or art installations, but then I have a handful of smaller scale commission pieces that I also have on my plate. So I think that it's allowed me, I think more than anything, the year of yes, and it's actually kind of turned into the year of hell yeah, which I know you're like, really be careful on that one.
No,
but
definitely,
for me,
run head first into that shit.
Instead of, it is definitely a year of yes, but that year of yes is more a year of, does this make me uncomfortable? Does this make me feel vulnerable? Yeah, it does. Okay, cool. Push yourself through it and push your boundaries and grow. And so for me, year of yes is more about me and less about, oh, you want me to do that? Sure, I can do that. I've actually turned down a couple of projects recently. One, because I know I'm a one-woman show and I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. And I don't want to get burned out. I have great momentum going for me right now. I want to maintain it without getting burned out. And I know that if I take on too much and I commit to too much, I will get burned out, and I don't want that. So it's more a year of, do you feel uncomfortable like doing podcasts? Do you feel uncomfortable? Yeah. Do you feel uncomfortable talking about yourself and your art and your creativity? Yeah. But if I can inspire one other human on this planet to take a leap of faith or follow their dream or do something that scares them because they're following my journey or they've seen my work or whatever the case may be, then all of that discomfort and vulnerability is absolutely worth it, because I've never, in practicing law I did full-time litigation for 16 years. I've been an attorney for 20. In practicing law, I never felt like I got back what I put into it in terms of, I never felt like I did defense work. So your clients are already kind of screwed when they come to you, and then you unscrew them, but then they still owe you attorney's fees. So no one's really ever happy on the other end of it. And so for me, I've had people reach out to me in the last few months and say, you know what, you're inspiring me, or you're inspiring my daughter to create, or you're inspiring me to create, or you're inspiring me to reevaluate what I'm doing for a career. Like, can I do this other thing in conjunction? Can I do more than one thing to generate a revenue for myself instead of just pigeonholing myself in one career path or one job choice? And that's really cool that if people are reaching out and they're just like, thank you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I've made a difference in just one person's life. And that's so cool, because I never felt that before until the last few months or even this year. So it's been cool. It's been fun.
Yeah, that's there's an old video. I don't know if it's old. I think it's filmed in black and white, but it's a rabbi talking about how a lobster, in order for it to grow, it has to like essentially leave its shell. And so it's got to become vulnerable. And it gets to the point where it's uncomfortable to be in that shell. So he has to leave and become vulnerable in order to grow. And so I think it's a good metaphor for life. I mean, you really have to step outside of your comfort zone and start saying yes to some things that would normally make you feel uncomfortable, or you'd be intimidated by, or you're not sure that if you could do this. Sometimes it's okay to go out there, and if you fail, you've learned something. But if you don't fail and you succeed, it was worth taking that leap. But either way, you're not going to know until you take that leap.
Yeah. Oh, I have absolutely surprised myself this year by pushing my creative boundaries. I built my first actual 3-dimensional piece. I built a guitar. I took a real guitar and I made templates out of cardboard, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how I'm going to bend this. I don't know how I'm going to make a handle, but I'm just going to figure it out. And I surprised myself with it. Like, it actually looks like a guitar. Like, okay. And then with the grapevine sculpture, I did not know. I've never used heat to manipulate metal. And I took the job knowing that I had never done that, but that I would figure it out and that it would be uncomfortable. It would be a steep learning curve. But once I figured it out, it's actually one of my favorite things to do in my shop now. I'm like, what else can I melt? So.
Now, you're using like a rosebud to do all that?
Yes, I used a rosebud I could have probably dropped it down to an actual like welding tip for some of the finer stuff, but I kind of picked some brains, and it was pointed out to me that, if you have a smaller flame, you're going to have a more pinpointed flame. But if you have a bigger flame, you might have a more heat happening at the point of contact. So it's 6 in one, half dozen the other. Yeah, you use more gas, but it happens faster, or you use less gas, but it takes more time.
Yeah, it takes forever. So, yeah, it's all about the BTUs.
Yeah, but and I'm learning. I almost blew myself up one time, but it's okay.
What'd you do?
I survived. I don't know how to get. I hadn't used an oxyacetylene setup, and I had the torches and everything. I should have used propane. For all of you out there who are heating things and all you're doing is heating it, propane's way cheaper. Yep. But I had the oxyacetylene setup, torch, and everything from 10 years ago. And so I thought, I'll just use that. It'll be cheaper. It wasn't, but I learned a lot. But it was an old gauge I hadn't used in probably 10, 12 years. And when I turned it on, it just blew. And I wasn't going to blow up. It was oxygen. There was no flame, but it did scare the pants off me for a minute. Yeah. So.
Wow. Yeah, you got to be careful with rosebuds too, because if you get a rosebud that's too high, it puts out too much BTUs for the amount of acetylene that you can safely withdraw from a cylinder within the course of an hour. It'll start popping and smoking, and you'll get flashback and everything. That's a signal that the fuel is trying to go back into the torch because it's being starved. It's not getting enough fuel, and it's going to start trying to go back down the torch. Your torch will actually start getting like red hot. But yeah, so
how do you compensate for that?
Step down to a smaller torch, or you step up the size of your acetylene, because acetylene is liquid and you can only run it below 15 psi. So it's all about the volume that it's actually pulling through. So it's very similar to propane in that fashion, that it's a liquid gas and you're extracting it in a gaseous form. So it's like it used to be a 1:7 ratio. Now I think OSHA has mandated to like a 1:10. So it just depends on the weight. So if you have a 50-pound cylinder, 10% of that you can only pull out like 5 pounds per hour. So you just have to make sure you have a torch rated for that. So 5 pounds or less. But if you step up to a bigger rosebud, it's going to try and pull more fuel, and you're going to start having feeding issues with it.
I am constantly impressed with the amount of knowledge in all of your guys' brains. Because all of the numbers and calculations and everything that you have to know in order to do, I have to write it down and like double check.
Well, I taught it for like whatever 6 years, so I could send you a PowerPoint on it.
Okay, like I'm down. I'm
actually,
a sponge
you know what?
right now.
I did a video on YouTube with weld.com. Look up weld.com and type in oxyfuel cutting or oxyfuel video, and there's like a full comprehensive. It's like a 45-minute long video, but I cover it all in there.
Perfect. Yeah, if you start rattling off, maybe that's why I went to school to be a vet, and I took chemistry for idiots and was like, okay, this is not my jam. I can't do that. So I had to pivot. but people start talking numbers and things. It's almost like my brain just shuts down. So it must have been that I went to law school to avoid math, and now I'm an artist to avoid math. Like either way, I don't want to deal with numbers.
I feel you on that one. I'm not big on numbers.
I need
either.
What are those gator coatings? Like when you match your shirt with your pants, you need like a red gator, and I need that for like, okay, if you're going to heat it, you need the reds to match up. If you're going to cut it, you need the greens to match up.
Oh yeah, I don't match anything. I wear blue jeans and like earth tones, so I really can't screw it up.
Yeah.
So you said you went to school to be a veterinarian, and you ended up becoming a lawyer. How's that work?
Well, I was a dairyman's daughter, so I always loved the animal part of it. And so I went to UC Davis, and I thought I was going to be a vet. And I literally in my first quarter took chemistry. It was like chemistry 10 or something super basic, like Idiot's Guide to Chemistry. And I immediately knew that that was not my jam. And so I had to real quick pivot and try to figure out like what I wanted to do. And I fell in love with all the philosophy classes. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to get a philosophy degree, but what would I do with that? And then I was like, oh, okay, the next best thing. So I wound up, long story short, with sociology and political science degrees was one class away from a minor in philosophy. And I looked around and asked my counselor, I was like, what am I going to do with this degree? And she was like, well, you can either teach or you can go to law school. And I took both the entrance exams or both the, law school entrance exams and I think it's called the CBEST to be a teacher, and took them both and literally decided at the last minute, like, well, I guess I'm going to go to law school because I don't have a lot of children in my world, and I don't know that I would be a good teacher. I don't know how much patience I have for I did teach at the university for one quarter years ago, and I only did it one quarter. I don't think I like the out of the box thinking and to push boundaries, and it wasn't my jam either. So yeah, law school became a lawyer, and that's what I did.
Damn. That's freaking nuts. You go in as a vet, you come out as an attorney.
Right. And end up as an artist. It's kind of a weird path.
That's what I was telling you that night at the bar. Like, that's all I wanted to be when I was growing up as a kid. I wanted to be an attorney. I'd watched like Matlock and Law and Order SVU, and like now Suits is out and like all that stuff. Like, I always thought it'd be kind of cool to be an attorney. And then I realized how much reading they have to do and how much I don't enjoy reading. And so I was like, no, maybe I'm just going to stick with this welding gig.
Yeah. I never have been someone who I would read like self-help books or like learning materials, like learn how to weld or whatever. But I've never been able to just pick up a book and enjoy it for pleasure because I did so much reading in law school and so much reading when I was doing litigation that the thought of sitting down to relax to read made my eye twitch. I just could not do it.
Get out in the shop. Get out in the shop, burn something, melt something.
Yep.
Bend it, twist it, weld it.
And that's exactly what my metal work became for me, was an outlet to get away from the brains, like not the brain stuff, but like the reading and the desk job and the, just because I can just throw my headphones on or turn my stereo up and zone out and just create and not have to worry about anything. And whatever ends up. Sometimes it goes in the trash. Sometimes it hangs on the wall because I'm not quite sure if it's done yet. And then other times it actually gets kicked out the door. So
yeah. Now, when you're planning out these projects, are you only thinking about them in the garage while you're working on them, or are you driving to and from your adult job and doing your adult type work things, thinking about how you're going to like the next steps in the process?
Oh, it's so funny. My brain, I don't think ever shuts off when I'm working on big projects. Constantly thinking, well, because remember, a lot of it is a new adventure for me. So I'm constantly thinking about like what worked in the shop yesterday. What can I do tomorrow differently? Is there a way I can streamline the process? Is there a way I can make it all cooler? I'm constantly, and I have my iPad with me all the time. So I'll sketch if I have a new idea, or if I want to tweak something, I'll open up my iPad and pull up the drawing I originally had and see what it looks like. But it's so funny. Whenever I sketch something, the final piece almost never looks like what I originally sketched, because I'm literally one of those create in the moment kinds of people. Mm-hmm. And if it might look good on paper or it might work mathematically or whatever, but when you build it, it's kind of like hanging a picture. Sometimes you can measure and do all the things and make it exactly on the center and make it exactly level, but it still looks crooked because maybe the ceiling's a little bit off or the flooring or something in the room is shadowing. So yeah, you can design it all you want, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't look right, I like to try to make it look right as I go, as opposed to make it look like the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I've got the same problem. I can't turn my brain off. So my buddy come to me with this project, and he's like, "Hey, there's this company out in Ybor City, and they want us to build a humidor." And I was like, "Well, shit, I've never built a humidor. You start off with Spanish cedar, like that's all I know about it." I was actually considering building one, but he's like, "No, this needs to be a structure. It's like 17 foot tall and 23 foot wide, all 3x3 aluminum square tubing." And so he kind of gave me, he put like a rough sketch up on the dry erase board, and I'm looking at it, and like we got like 3 weeks before we're going to start construction on this thing. And so I've already built it in my head 20 times before the material even shows up. And so when it shows up, he starts cutting everything to length, and I'm slapping it together, tacking it and everything. And he's like, "Damn, like how?" He's like, "I got to figure out how to get my brain to do that." And I was like, "Dude, I've built this thing 10 times in my head, within the past couple of days. Like I can't turn it off. I was the same way when I was working out in the field as an iron worker. Like I'm looking at the beams that are on the ground and where they need to go the next day, and I'm already developing a rigging plan while I'm on the drive home, that day, so that when I come in the next day, I know exactly where to start and what to do. Like I just picture things or like kind of run them through my head several times before I do anything.
Do you think that's more of the harder the problem, the more thought you put into it, like in the background? Because like for me, when I was doing litigation, if I had a big brief or a big memo I had to do or something, or a big argument the next day, or whenever, I would literally spend more time thinking about it and preparing my arguments than I would actually drafting the argument itself. Because I think it was like the more complicated it was, the longer I would take to actually prepare the document, because I would spend so much time thinking about it. And sometimes I feel like that's like with my commissioned pieces and stuff. Someone will say, "Oh, can you do this?" And I'll be like, "Sure." And if it's an easier one, I'll start it right away and just knock it out and get it done. If it's a harder one, I feel like I think and think and think and think and process and build and rebuild and all the things until I'm like, okay, this has to be done in like a week. So I have to get my shit together and start working on it, or it's not going to get done. But by then I've thought about it so many times, actually building it seems to be easier than if I had started right away or whatever. I don't know.
So let me ask you this, and this is kind of a personal question. Are you a procrastinator?
Oh, sometimes I can be, I think.
You procrastinated on the answer.
In some things. Say what?
I said you procrastinated just now on the answer. There was some hesitation there.
I think I can be, but because I think procrastination can have two forms. I think one form can be I'm just procrastinating because I don't want to do it. But the other form can be I don't know how to do it and I'm scared to do it. So I'm going to wait until I absolutely have to do it. And that's kind of where I sit, is like sometimes if I'm scared to do something, I'll wait until I absolutely have to do it and I have no choice. And then I just put my head down and I do it. But during that time, I'm constantly thinking about it. Yes. So I'm still working on it. I'm just not building it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I asked, because I'm a procrastinator by nature. And I think that's kind of like my superpower. Because if something,
or your serial killer trait.
Well, yeah, that might be that. But like if I know there's a due date for something, and I've got all this time to work on it, like my daughter's doing the same thing with her science project right now, and it just drives me mad because she's a procrastinator like I am. But I would, like you were saying, I would think about it the entire time, and then like 2 days before it's due, I just put my nose to the grindstone and I get it done because I've been thinking about it for the past 2 weeks or however long. So I just get in there and get it done instead of, okay, on day one, I'm going to do a little bit. And then on day two, I'm going to do a little bit more. And I'm just going to start, until, the day before the project's due, it's all done. No, I need to be under the gun, because I think that way, once the pressure's on and it's like, okay, there's no other way out. We have to get this done or get through it. That's what allows me to shut everything else off my brain and quit thinking about a million other things and focus on the one important thing that I need to get done, like right now.
Same. I think we're cut from the same cloth in that regard, but I don't know that that's necessarily procrastination. It might just be a different way of moving through the world.
That's the way it's labeled. That's what all my teachers and my parents always told me, is procrastination.
Labels are meant to be thrown in the trash. It's fine.
Go. Yeah, it's a nice little box for everybody to put you in. But yeah, no, I do the same thing.
Yes.
I procrastinate up until the last minute or hold off.
Yeah.
It's a maybe it's a planned execution. I don't know.
Perhaps.
Yeah. So I'll think about it up until the time it's time to make it happen, and then like pull out all the stops and just get the shit done. Because like I said, I've already built it, or I've already done it, in my head several times.
So as a superpower, I think it would be, instead of when somebody's like, oh, you're a procrastinator, it should be, no, I'm a planned executioner. I am in there to win it and get it done. Might be at the last minute, but it will get done.
There you go. I like that. That's way better than procrastination. Procrastination just sounds so dirty.
Right.
Makes me sound lazy. I really got my shit together,
right?
though.
Yeah. No, I think there are genuine personality types out there who procrastinate because they just don't want to do it or whatever. But I think you and I are different in that we might not be we might not be visually working on it, but we're working on it up in our brains.
Yeah, mentally.
Almost harder than we do when we actually do it.
Yeah. I do the same thing when I'm getting ready to travel and I have to pack. Like I've already packed my suitcase 5 times before I actually go to the garage, grab my suitcase, open it up, and start putting things in it.
Are we separated at birth somehow? Like, did that happen? Because I feel like
I don't know. It's
I'm
just
the same way.
Beaten in my head that proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. So I think things through like almost ad nauseum to the point where it's kind of sickening sometimes. But yeah, I just plan everything out.
Do you, when you're thinking things through, do you actually sketch it, measure it, draw plans, like if you're building something, or do you just think about it and then you go out and build it?
No, because I can't draw for shit. I think about it. I think about it. Like if you give me materials and the tools, I can make all the straight lines and the required angles and all that stuff. But if I have to sit down and draw it, the entire sheet's gonna go from white to gray because of how many times I've had to erase things. I actually almost failed drafting because the smears and the smudges on the paper. It wasn't until I got into college that I learned there's a cool little trick to get rid of all the smears and smudges. You actually take the and this predates AutoCAD. This is like when you actually have to draw the things out on a drafting table.
Yeah.
There's an eraser bag that comes with your kit that I never understood what the hell that was for. Well, you shake that eraser kit or that eraser bag over top of your paper before you start drawing on it, and it allows all of your tools a separation between the paper and the lead. And as it picks up any extra graphite or whatever off the page, it rolls it up onto the eraser shavings. So all of your tools still slide nice and neat across the paper, but there's no smudges, there's no smears, there's none of that.
Oh, interesting. Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, my dad, he can build, I swear that man can build absolutely anything. But he spends his time actually drawing and designing and doing all the things. And whereas I will do like one sketch as like an overall concept, or if I think of something, like I said, I'll open my iPad and I'll tweak something just to remind myself like, oh, hey, you had this, almost like a journal, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, cross this out. Don't do that. And like the original grapevine concept was one big grapevine that was running through the whole entire space. But logistically, it wasn't going to work in terms of both transport. I mean, there was no way to transport a 50-something foot grapevine. And then when it had to go up and around the columns, then it was turned into a 65-foot grapevine sculpture. Yeah. There's no way to transport one piece. So, it just evolved into 6 separate trunks and representative of each one of the family members. And, that was fine. But I still have my original sketch of just one grapevine. It never changed after that. Mm-hmm. I doodled a couple of ideas for what I kind of maybe wanted a trunk to look like, but they don't look anything. None of my stuff ever looks like that. And I always tell clients, I'm like, look, here's a sketch. Here's a concept. It will not look like this. It is the overall concept that you are approving because it will not look like this. I'm just telling you now. So I don't know. But my dad and I, we work very differently. He sketches it out and then he will literally build exactly what is on the paper. Whereas I will look at the paper and be like, it's art.
Yeah. No, but I think it's really cool how you had because they wanted a family tree and you were like, okay, Italy, wine, grapes. It was either that or an olive bush, one of the two.
Right.
So, but
yeah, an olive tree did come up in the conversation. So,
okay. But having one tree for each member of the family to kind of feed into one massive grapevine, which represents the family. I think that's really cool. I showed you the picture of the family tree I did. But it's like every branch represents a specific family member of the siblings, and then that kind of branches off, and it's got all their kids and all that stuff on there. But yeah, I mean, it just incorporates each segment. So it's separate, but it's together. It's a whole.
Right. Yeah. So, nothing ever looks like it does on paper for me. So I'm glad there's someone else out there in the world that does the same thing.
Yeah, that dude, Mike Miller. I think the funniest thing, because we always say in the field, oh yeah, it looks good on paper, because you get these engineers that they draw something up and they're like, this is how it's going to fit in the field, and you get out in the field and you're like, you can't make this connection because this other stuff that you have here is in the way. But
right.
We'd always say, yeah, it looks good from my house, or it looks good on paper. But Mike Miller said, yeah, you can draw a horse on paper, but try to ride it. So I freaking love that. It's like, yeah, it looks good on paper, but like, let's try to bring this into reality, and it doesn't happen.
Right.
So like the ability to say, okay, here's kind of what we're going for. Let's see how to get there, and say, okay, here's, like you said, here's the concept. It's not going to look like the finished product, but this is kind of the angle that we're going for.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good way to do things, especially from an artistic point of view, because you have that freedom. I mean, they're hiring you because they trust your judgment. You're the subject matter expert when it comes to the art and the medium you're working with, and that's why they're hiring you, and they're not doing it themselves.
Right. Yep. And I will do commission pieces where they have a very specific concept that they want. I'm open to doing them. It's my preference to have as much creative freedom as I possibly can with a project, just because there are times, like we've talked about, where it just doesn't look right. You know what I mean? Like the original concept is just not gonna work for whatever reason. And so to be able to have that freedom to manipulate the project as a whole, or even an aspect of it, is important, I think, in terms of me being proud of my final work product and making, if I sign off at it, I'm like, this is what I wanted it to look like. And I like having that creative freedom and liberty to experiment and figure out what I want to present. But what the client wants is also important as well. So,
well, it can be, but that's when you get first right of refusal. So you can say, yeah, no,
right.
That's really not within, that's not what I'm thinking. So maybe I could refer you to somebody else and they could do that for you. But
And I do that because I feel pretty strongly like I want to have an open line of communication with people, whether we agree to work together or not. And if I can help them find someone, like I got asked to do a project and I flat out said, it would be so much more cost effective and efficient for you to go to the local fabrication shop than for me to make this for you. If you want to add some artistic flair to it after it's built, fine. But this is something that needs to go elsewhere. And I'm fine saying that. I did the same thing when I practiced law. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. I'll find the answer, but I might not know it right there on the spot. I'm the first one to say, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know the answer to that, but I can make it and I can figure it out. That's, I think, the difference. Some people say, oh yeah, I can totally do that. And they're like, don't ever really should not be saying that. But
see, but you said you didn't teach, but that's the key to a good educator too. Because knowing when to say, well, just because I told my students all the time, I don't know everything there is to know about welding. Trust me, the more I learn about welding, the more I realize I don't know shit about welding. So if I don't know an answer, I'm not going to BS you. You and I were going to go on a field trip. We're going to go open up Google, or we're going to open up, I've got all the books and everything. I know exactly where to find things, but I don't know the answer to your question. Let's go find out together.
Yeah. And that's cool. And I think now I'm in my 40s. I have lived a lot of life. And I think when I was making that decision in the 20s, I would not have been a good teacher. So I think that now I would be willing to do it, especially if it's something that I'm passionate about. I think it's different teaching just to teach, but if you're teaching something that you're passionate about, like you said, you don't know the answer. You're going to take your student, you're going to go find it together. And now you will know the answer the next time somebody asks. And so I think when you teach something that you're passionate about or that you care about, you're willing to say, I don't know the answer, but let's go learn together. So that, and you're still willing to learn and not just read out of a book, or, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think that's cool that you are willing to do that with your students, especially with being so forthright with, hey, I don't know the answer, but let's figure it out together.
Yeah. I even when people reach out to me on Instagram, they're like, hey, what's this, and this? Shit, I don't know. I'll get back to you on that one. Like, I'll mark it unread, and then I'll go find the answer, and then I'll come back and give them resources and links and all that stuff.
No, I think it's important. And I think too, for me, at least in my education, I always learned best, like, especially when I was a baby attorney and I would go into one of the partners' office and just say, hey, how do I do X, Y, and Z? And they would literally say, I don't know. Go figure it out. And I really, in that moment, just wanted them to give me the answer because I was in a deadline and I was in a crunch. But had they told me, it's kind of like all you guys with all the welding info in your brain and you're rattling off all the information and my poor little brain just doesn't absorb it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing. If I go and I figure out like, oh, these settings have to be here, or this worked because these settings were here, or this didn't work because of this, I'm going to be better off learning it that way than, had the partner back in the day just said, oh yeah, just do this. I would have been in there 10 more times asking them the same damn question because I wouldn't have learned it. But when you have to go and learn it for yourself through experience or hands-on training, the likelihood of the retention, I think, is much higher.
Or through failure.
Failure is the fastest way to learn, in my opinion. And I am not afraid to learn through failure. I think that's why this year of saying yes to being vulnerable and being willing to experiment and push my boundaries has been so good for me, because I think prior to this year, if you'd asked me, are you afraid of failure? I would have said, absolutely. Absolutely. I do not like to fail. And if I think I'm going to fail at something, I will not do it. And this year has put me out in a space where I have to fail in order to move forward. I have to be willing to push those boundaries. And it has made me, am I still afraid of failure? Yeah, sure. Nobody likes to fail. But what I've learned this year is that through failure, you truly grow. Through being uncomfortable, you grow. Mm-hmm. And so allowing yourself the space and grace to be uncomfortable and to say, hey, I don't know the answers, but I'm willing to try. Or I don't know what this is going to look like, but I'm going to experiment, or whatever the case may be. I think that's when you truly do some of your biggest growth. And failure is definitely in that mix, for sure.
Yeah, that used to be part of my graduation speech. I'd kind of like give the same speech, but not like verbatim. But I always left in the part where, it's okay to fail. Like failure is the stepping stones to success. Because nobody just walks out there and gets it right 100% of the time. You got to screw a lot of things up to get where you're at, where you want to be. And it's okay.
For sure.
Learn as long as you don't hurt nobody, you don't hurt yourself. Fail forward. Just figure that shit out and just keep moving. But remember, you're gonna learn so much more through your failures, and you're gonna be able to share that experience with others, so they don't make the same mistakes or make the same failures.
And I think failure gives you a level of confidence too, right? It's not just learning; it's a level of confidence. Like, hey, I failed this time, but I'm going to do it again and I'm going to do it differently. And then when you ultimately succeed, now you're like, hey, I did that. I can own that success. I can move forward next time with more confidence. And I think a lot of people are afraid of failing because it means they can't do something. And that's not the case at all. It just means that under that set of circumstances, in that moment, it wasn't the right time or it wasn't the right opportunity. But if you do it again and maybe you do one thing differently or two or three things differently, the next time you may very well succeed. And I don't know. I think I just have a different perspective. Like I said, if you'd asked me a year ago, are you afraid of failure? I would have said, yeah, it's my biggest fear. Now it's like maybe in the top 5. So it's gotten better.
They call that experience.
Yeah. Age. It's called maturity.
There you go. Yeah. No, that's great. So are you still doing, are you open to commissions now? You still taking on commissions?
So yes, in a way. I think that the big projects with Wasco are going to keep me pretty tied up between now. They're set to be installed June 1st or by June 1st. My goal is May 1st. So for the next 6 months, I'm going to be pretty busy with those, plus the handful of more private commissions that I've taken on. I'm open to commissions on if they're like a smaller thing, like, hey, can you make this rose for me for whatever? Yeah, sure. Here, it's done in an hour. But I'm open to bigger commissions probably after June 1st. I think if I don't want to take on anything that's going to distract me from those bigger projects that I've already committed to and the smaller scale ones. Because like I said, I want to turn out a good product and I don't want to be rushing my process to where I'm not proud of what goes out of my shop door. So yes and no. So yes, if someone can wait 6 months, not if they need something big in the next, 90 to 120 days.
Okay.
So,
well, where can people reach out to you if they want to commission you to do a piece for them, whether it's a rose or something larger that they can get done after June 1st?
So probably the easiest, fastest way to find me is on my website, which is www.meraki.metalworks.net. So it's MERAKI metal, METAL works, WORKS.net. That has direct links to my Instagram, Facebook, all the stuff. So that's probably the easiest way.
Okay. And then what's your Instagram?
Instagram is at marikai.metal.works.
Okay. And then what is Marikai? I've been wanting to ask
So
you.
Marikai, that's like everybody wants to ask.
I was like, that's her last name. And I was like, no, it's Palla.
No, it's not. So it's actually a Greek word. And technically it's properly, it's pronounced Meraki.
Okay.
And it's Greek for to do something with passion, or to, for example, create from your heart and soul. Like if you're going to do it with your heart and soul, put it into it. And I thought it was appropriate for my artwork.
Oh, okay. That's kind of like the Japanese word ikigai.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Finding yourself through the passion of your work or whatever.
Yep.
No, really cool.
Yep. Yeah. So I thought it's that word is, I don't know even how I came across it, but when I came across it, it just is one of those things that just resonated. And I was like, that's what I need for my art business. So it used to be Rusty Customs back when I first started, but people would Google it and it was a guy, like a bald guy, and he had nothing to do with metal. And it was obviously not me with all of this stuff going on the top of my head. So, yeah. So then when I rebranded, I was like, nope, definitely Marikai. And I like the sound of Marikai as opposed to Meraki. It's just, I don't know, preference, I guess, but
no, it's really cool. Put your own spin on it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Alisyn, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It was great meeting you at FabTech. I hope I get to see you down here in Orlando, and I look forward to checking out all your pieces that you're going to be putting out for the June 1st exhibit. Yeah,
Jason, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, and I will be in Orlando in 24.
Awesome. I can't wait to taste the best old-fashioned I've ever had.
The one that I make, right?
Well, I mean, that's what you said. I'm not gonna say mine's not up there in the running, but we'll see.
You know what? It could very well be a tie, and we could be okay with that.
It's a possibility. My buddy makes a pretty good one too, so we'll have to. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a tough decision for the judge. It's going to be close. We got to just make sure we have some neutral third party. Might have to bring some people from California just in case. Okay, I mean, bring them on out. Sounds good. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for downloading the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are enjoying the show and all of the content, please leave a review on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps the show out. Also, please share the episodes with anyone you think would enjoy or find benefit from the content. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.